on, Kayla. Good evening, everybody. I hope all is well. We welcome you to another episode of Real Talk Family Life, brought to you by Faith Tabernacle and Caribbean Evangelical Ministers. I'm your host again, Sasha Sutherland, for this evening. Today, we're going to discuss enduring love. And we remind you that our discussions are still guided by the Titus 2 passage related to doing good for the sake of the gospel. Tonight, as always, we have two amazing speakers, Brother Arthur Pear and Bishop Dr. Gavin Garraway. We encourage you, as always, to make your interventions via the Zoom and YouTube chats as we spend the next hour focusing on enduring love. We hope tonight to get an understanding of the greatest expression of love that we've ever witnessed or heard of, to talk a bit about consummate love and the balance that occurs when we love someone else, and basically how it can equally be painful as much as it is joyful to love someone else. So I'm going to allow our speakers to introduce themselves, and then we will jump right in, starting with you, Brother Pear.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sutherland, and good evening, everybody. My name is Arthur Pear from Grenada. Former teacher, and well, I do a lot of work with men, but I wear a lot of hats, and I am currently in disaster management. So I'm making a lot of shift in career. But it's nice to be here, and it's always good to discuss issues that affect our families.
And Bishop Garraway, no stranger to our program.
Well, I am Bishop Garraway. I'm the Senior Pastor of Glory Church in St. James, and it's a privilege again to be back on this program as we discuss and as we, discuss back and forth. I love the program, different minds, different concepts, and tonight I hope that I always tell people you don't have to believe anything I believe. I hope it helps you to think. It is, and I think that's some of the biggest problems. Sometimes we don't think on the topic. We just respond and react to the realities of our lives. And when you take time and you actually, and I think, that with a program like this, it gives you a basis to start off your thinking. So again, you don't have to agree with everything, because sometimes, some of my stuff might be way out there, but at least it gives you something to contemplate. So thank you again for having me. God bless you.
Fantastic. And we want to contemplate, especially for those of us who may not have yet taken the jump over the broom or, walk down the aisle. We want to make sure we think. And for even those of us who are already in it, there are some things that perhaps we did not consider that we need to have a sit down to navigate. So as I said, tonight we're talking about enduring love, and we're jumping right in, gentlemen. When we look at the New Testament, they advocate that the highest expression of love is death. Would you say that our emphasis on love's feelings in this era has caused us to ignore love's commitment? And this is basically a continuation from the last 2 weeks of conversation. So, Bishop Garraway, I'm coming to you first to ask you, do you think we're ignoring what it means to really and truly be committed to love in favor of how love makes us feel, the butterflies, and you make me feel good, and you make me feel like a natural woman, and all these things?
Well, I believe, yes. I believe, from years of counseling, etc., I think, again, most people, they see marriage from the context of needs. And while it's a definite reason for marriage, God said it was not good for man to be alone, and the fact that woman was created to be a helpmeet, and also to have her needs met, that God would inbuilt in and allow to develop in her. I still believe that marriage must take on the foundation of purpose orientation for the believer. I believe that once we start getting outside of that, then what happens is that we cheapen the whole aspect of the thing. Because if I marry just based upon physical attributes, You know, for the woman, just like the man, gravity comes to attack after a while.
We don't know what you're talking about, Bishop Gary.
Back no crack. Gravity attacks all of us in different ways. And so therefore, but again, when we understand purpose, and I believe purpose is a connection between the love of God and, you know, it's a reason for existing. And I believe when God puts a reason for our existence, it's directly connected to his love for us. Because in the purpose of the man, in the purpose of the woman, God is not good. There's certain dimensions, certain things that God allowed to happen for a certain spermatozoa to hit a certain egg. And there's a reason why I believe, you know, they tell you those 450 million or whatever it is sperm, there's one alone. You know, there's a reason behind that, which one God chooses and God allows. Even some people, as you know, when I was a young minister, my perspective was like, I used to think like when people were born of incest, that incest was a good reason for abortion until I met children born of incest. And I realized that they had purpose too and they had life. So therefore, I was very cautious, and again, that's up for discussion, etc., sometimes people are born of rape, people are born of all different things, but there is purpose when God allows that life to be ignited, etc. And I believe, it was Mark Twain who said the two most important days in a man's life is the day he was born, the day he finds out why. And I believe that's the essence of manhood, knowing what God sent you on the earth to change or to add or to and of course, I believe getting a wife has to correspond to that. And therefore, I believe a lot of times people jump the gun because of the fact that they have needs and desire, etc. And a man, one of the things about it, when the Bible talks about the love of God and God himself being that example where Christ died for us. In the book of Romans, it says, even for a good man, people might dare to die, but God died for us while we were yet unworthy. And the thing about it is that the Bible explains that the relationship between the man and his wife has to be an expression of Christ and the church. Now, I know there are going to be different aspects of it, but many times, I believe a man has to develop himself. He has to come to a certain level before he gets a wife. I'm traditional, very traditional. I know there are different perspectives in the church. And so therefore he has something to lay down, So when God says, for God so loved the world that he gave, he had something to give. You understand? He had something to offer. And I think sometimes men marry women to get, you understand? Only just to take, etc. And therefore the relationship immediately starts off in a bad direction. And I'm going to smooth it off as we continue. But it's important, I think, to understand that when we understand that the relationship between Christ and the church is reflected in the husband and wife, that's the mystery of marriage. Then unless we understand that as men and that aspect of where we're going to have to die to self. And that dying to self, as people say, it's real easy to die for Jesus, living for Jesus. With dying daily is a different dimension of dying. And that's the dying I think that we need to see in the context of marriage, where I have to handle disappointments. I have to handle my own growth as well as the growth of my wife, as well as the changing of situations around me. So if I can die to self and I can be an example, then after I can lay the foundation for an enduring home. If I am changing and I'm a man who cannot keep my word, I'm a man who lacking integrity, etc., then I put shaky ground and shaky foundations for the relationship to be developed. So that's my first shot.
And before we go to Brother Pay, Bishop Gary, I want you to consider what you just said about man laying the foundation and how important it is to have sturdy men before we even start considering marriage. I'm going to come back to you on that point, but just in case I forget. Brother Pay, butterflies or commitment?
I think Brother Gary just laid almost everything on the table. It's very very comprehensive. But indeed, what we do see is what the world paints, the picture the world paints as love. And it is filled with emotion, it is filled with what I could have, what I could get, what would satisfy me as an individual. And a lot of times, individuals seldom think that this is about sacrifice. Individuals within relationships seldom consider that what you're doing is something that you are willing to is something that is sacrificial. It's something that you're willing to say later on down the road, regardless of what, I will be there. All right. We enjoy the nice, soft, emotional moments at the beginning of a relationship. But when push comes to shove, or the old people would say, when the rubber hits the road, when the challenges of life come, too often we see persons just kind of walking away because they cannot, withstand the challenges. Or they are not willing to really and truly give sacrificially. And I agree with Pastor Garwe again, when we look at the whole issue of what do you do as a man in preparation for marriage. Just as Christ, just as God did, when he brought Adam into a garden, that garden was prepared already. All right, he had everything prepared for Adam and Eve to exist and to function within the garden. So he prepared the thing beforehand. Now that is an example. Again, I want to say that men should follow. I must be a complete individual, and having all the things necessary to have a relationship, to cause it to grow, to nourish it, to cause it to, you create an environment of love and everything, all the things that a family would need, the man should be able to and have the ability to provide. Right? So I think that's my small for short, not as comprehensive as my brother. I just love his the way that he laid it out. Trust me, I love it.
He would tell you he has a lot of years in this game, and perhaps
yes, of course,
the practice. But no, I think you said it well. The question I was going to ask Bishop Gary was about men and being the complete individual and creating that garden and that space. And again, what you say reiterates the culture that we live in, right? Because I think it was 2 weeks ago we spoke about sometimes the women come with house, with jobs, with success, and it almost seems like they're complete. And oftentimes, not all the time, men are coming perhaps not leveled up, to use Bishop Garvey's word in his opening statement, and we seem to have an imbalance. And so there are immediately tensions when we don't recognize what Bishop Garvey said, purpose orientation, and the fact that marriage is supposed to reflect God's love for the church. And so when you're not providing, or you're not helping, or I don't feel like you understand, it creates a lot of problems. But I like what you said, Brother Pear, creating the environment for love and the garden already being prepared. So that was the question I was going to ask you, Bishop. I don't know if you want to add anything, or we can jump into question 2.
On the portion of scriptures I'm drumming to my young men, which unfortunately was not, I didn't have that opportunity. I had to learn the hard way. And as I was told by my mentor, experience is the greatest teacher, because a fool can learn no other way. That's the whole proverb. So normally what about 1/3 of the proverb? So again, Proverbs 24 and 27 says, prepare thy work without, and make it fit for thyself in the field, and afterwards build thy house. So many times men looking for a woman to build the house for them to go in, or they're looking for a house that done build. You understand? When they themselves, there's a process, and I believe in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 to 31, about there, it gives us the 5 processes of a man's life, the 5 processes. 5 phases of a man's life. The first phase is learning, because man is not created, he's made in the image and likeness of God. And then he has to understand wealth development, because the rich rules over the poor, all right? And then he has to understand purpose, warring against the creeping things. And only after man comes to an understanding of purpose, then he understands what type of wife he needs. You understand? There's some women who are field women. There's some women who are diplomats. There's some women who are the different types. Until you understand your purpose, to marry a woman might be to frustrate her. You understand? And frustrate yourself also too. And then, of course, afterwards, parenting, succession planning. So a man has got to come to the place where he has a certain dimension of development of competences, emotional, social, spiritual competences. He must also come to a place where he has a certain level of financial wherewithal. And then afterwards, when he has something that he understands beyond money. I believe money is the lowest level, even though people know me, I preach a lot on money, but I believe money is the lowest level of things, but yet it is a foundational thing. You know what? All right, money answers all things. And a man's ability to demonstrate his ability, his viability economically, is normally a test for how he will also handle life situations. The person who's able to build economically shows that he can farm his mind, and then he could take the nestlings of his mind, the seedlings and bestings of his mind, and plant it successfully into his environment. It's the same way now he has to be able to use his mind and plant wisdom and help develop his wife. Because for me, again, too, one thing that I'm very strong on teaching my young men is that one of the most important quality of a wife is adaptability and teachability. Because if she doesn't have those 2 elements, please leave her alone. She can be as pretty as Halle Berry, leave her be. That is because you have to wash your wife with the water of the word, that you might present to yourself a wife without spot or wrinkle. So nobody gets a perfect woman. You yourself are not perfect. But it seems so you want to have something set in place, but you need to have a certain dimension or character in that woman, etc.
We already have a question from Pastor Griffith. Are you suggesting that only the men need to bring something to the marriage? And then he continues, then some men should never marry because of the things they don't have.
Would you like me to touch that, or I'll leave that for Brother Pierre? Who want to touch that?
Any one of you, so you can go ahead.
I just want to make a comment before we look at the question. Again, I just want to look at just the ordinary man, and how he was brought up, how he was trained, how he was socialized. We do not prepare our young men and our men folk for marriage. Our society don't prepare them for marriage. All right? We might prepare them for work, we might prepare them for whatever else, but they are not prepared for marriage. Okay? What we do see though, and maybe diminishingly, women are prepared for marriage. Now, you said something earlier, Dr. Sutherland, that women sometimes come with all the things prepared. They come with their career, they come with their education and everything else. And they are prepared to get into marriage because they have become, as I like to put it, all one. But when it comes to, a lot of times when it comes to men folk, our society they apply the pressure that he should be the kind of way that he is, but in terms of preparation, a lot of times we falter in that regard. So you find, guys getting into relationships simply by the first base thing, and that is attraction. The girl looks nice, you go after the girl, there's that nice flutter and everything. And then the reality of the relationship, the reality of life begins to hit home. So I just wanted to make that comment. And of course, not only men that should bring something to the table. I do believe that, but that both parties must bring something to the table. But the man being one, the head of the household, being the leader, being the one that the Bible says the wife needs to submit to. He has the brunt of responsibility in terms of the direction that he wants his family to go. So he must be fortified, and he must have what it takes, the skills and the talents and the finances and everything that he needs to uphold his family. He must have that so that it becomes a little bit easier when the challenges of life hit. There is something that he can, produce or give, so that his family can continue.
Yeah.
Well said. Well said. Well
Okay.
said. Again, I've said this straight up front. I am traditional. Okay. And again, I'm not where I was many, many years ago. So I'm in a totally different position now. But when I did marry my wife, I moved to 11,000 kilometers. Eswatini to Trinidad. And as far as I can say, all she needed to do was land. You know, if she needed clothes, everything. Because again, I developed myself in certain dimensions. All right. And I found what it did, it made things much easier for her because she doesn't have to worry. But in picking her, I took time to listen to her vision. I took time to realize how it correlated to what God wanted to do in my life. And I wanted to, but I lay the foundation, and my wife is busy now in the background. Once she's come now, after a few years of comfort, she's now building out her businesses, building out different things. But even if it never produced $1, we are taken care of. You understand? So it's like she's the glory of the man. And I'm taking care of the foundational aspect. She doesn't need to work for survival. She doesn't need to work for us to go on vacations. But what we're doing now is to help facilitate the purposes of God and things that God spoke to her even before she met me. You understand? And I am facilitating those things happening very happily, etc. And that's, to me, where we have a basic, that's like a basic running track. Now, in between that now, we work out on the aspect of emotional needs, spiritual needs, etc. Those things also come in. Me understanding her love language, she understanding my love language, me understanding the dialect of that love language, etc., and all these realities. But again, it's like when biblically, when Rebecca left home, she didn't go into the Isaac scenario looking for support, Isaac was dependent upon her for support. You understand? But she was picked because she could move water in the wilderness. And the Isaac Foundation or family was one where they had herds and flocks and all these things like that. And that's the basis upon which the man prayed. And when he said, Lord, let the woman that I asked for a drink of water say, I wouldn't just take care of you, I'd take care of all the 10 camels who drink between 40 to 50 gallons of water. So it was a thought the man had in his mind when he asked for that water thing. It wasn't just a random something. When Boaz picked Ruth, again, too, he saw her working in the field, and he was a farmer. And he wouldn't need for her to do that for survival. But again, he understood her instincts in a particular direction. There's a wisdom in wife picking that a man has to learn from older men. Or we should, and I tell you, as I told them, when I went to South Africa years ago, so plenty curves down here, but where there are curves, there are cliffs. And I think that's part of the problem we have with our culture. Men just run behind the first pretty, sexy looking woman. Yes. And these days, every woman is pretty. And it's not on the outside. And it's the internal character of the fear of the Lord, her willingness to be biblical in her orientation. You understand? I'm not saying that has to be perfect, because a man, I believe, also part of his priestly responsibility is to seek to heal his wife, you understand, and to heal her self-esteem and work through those kind of things. And maybe we'll deal with that as we go on. All that is part of his priestly function, etc. Because sometimes there are holes that are left in we tend to say brought up seeing when she's been brought up, you know. But I personally, as a traditionalist, I believe that the man has the prime responsibility for taking care of the woman financially.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe it helps keep the order of the house too.
Right. Okay, so I'll let Pastor Griffith ask his question quickly, and then we're going to move in to the next segment. Pastor Griffith.
Yeah, good night. My comment is really a comment, rather, that there is a special, or let me say this first. Yes, we understand that there is a role in compatibility. Simply, there are some, I, Joseph, know that there's some women that just ain't for me. Not because that I am greater than them, but they might be more than me. I need you to understand what I mean when I say it that way. All right? So we need to know what really suits, what is compatible, what we're, in other words, me and Mike and Suzanne can exist together. We got a lot in common. I think that is important. I also believe that there is a special kind of, there's a song that says, you follow me to this place and whatever, but there was no gold mine. You follow me right through. There's a special bond that is priceless, that is created when a couple brings, I invert, nothing, but who work faithfully together and build up whatever become. And I will let us that when we do that, when we discuss this, remember that element. The other final point I will say quickly is that, yes, women might be attracted first by the curves. In the same way, women might be attracted with other social positions or the muscles that Joseph Griffith don't have. I pause. Thank you.
Yeah. I like what you said there, Pastor Griffith, about, we were just proposing one aspect, considering the conversations we'd had over the last few weeks. But I like what you said about it being beautiful when people bring nothing and work together to build. But I think that again goes back to purpose orientation, right? Like when you're picking a partner, whether or not that person has, you're making sure that your purpose and their purpose aligns, so that if we start at nothing, and we always do start at something. So even if you see potential, we know that we're working together towards. But I'll let you and Bishop Gary have that conversation perhaps on another program. Simply because it's already like 7 o'clock, or we probably park it for now and come back this at towards the end of the program. So we're in this relationship, Brother Pay and Bishop Gary. But I'm forgetting what Paul said, that love bears no records of wrongs. So when I'm painfully wrong, for example, he or she cheats, how do I get past that pain? And remember Paul's words. How do I love again? How do I see that person again from the beginning? How do I practice 70 times 7? How do I forgive? Brother Pay, I'm going to come to you first.
Whoa, that is a tough one. That is a tough one. I have seen the issue of adultery and cheating decimate relationships, not just the relationship between the man and the woman, but families. And it is it's a tough call to be able to pick up after that, and to rely and to rebuild the foundation of marriages, which one of the things is trust. Okay. I've seen men really just fall apart, simply because of a adulterous situation within their marriage, both men and women. To be able to build that back again would need maybe some, of course, help of God, and maybe some other support from other men, from other sources that is able to provide that kind of support. I think a lot of times when that happens, individuals within the relationships find it very difficult to forgive. And not just forgive, but to go on in the relationship. To do that takes a lot, and it might require some time, okay, patience, time, and a constant assurance on both sides that, you know, this is what we want to achieve, and we still can achieve it. You know, a happy family, achieve the goals and the objectives that you may set out to achieve. But let me tell you, it's easier said than done. You know, it is really, really difficult, really, really difficult. But the thing is, God has called us to forgive. He has called us to forgive. And even when we are in the confines of a relationship, you know, one of the things that we ought to be able to do is to cover our partner's wrongs. You see, you know, love covers a multitude of sins. And just as Christ has you know, sacrificially given himself to be able to cover our sins, we have to look to the example of Christ to be able to begin that healing. And that healing starts with individuals. It doesn't necessarily just start with the family, but it starts with the individual wanting and understanding what they want to achieve within the family and within that relationship that they have. I think that is what I could conjure up in terms of what should be done. But we are called above everything to forgive and to love.
Okay. First begin, I don't believe that marriage. Now, let me just say this to the question that the brother put. Again, one of the things I love about this program is sometimes we have different perspectives, etc. So, person made a comment earlier about building up from zero, etc. You know, and I have had experience on both sides. So, maybe one day when we discuss that, I'll explain the difference. And he said, from my perspective. And again, people, you know, can pick what they want. Now, let me just say, when it comes to adultery, I don't believe adultery is the end of a relationship. Forgiveness is much more powerful than pain. And sometimes pain opens you out to purpose if you're willing to spend time in the presence of God. I believe what ends a relationship is not just somebody being unfaithful, but somebody unwilling to change, unwilling to be repentant, willing to, if they want to continue in that particular scenario. I believe that's why I believe one of the things I said earlier is about healing your spouse, because it was a period of time between 95 and 97. I sat down with about 600 couples in my country, and that laid a heavy foundation. We're not talking joke counseling here. This was heavy counseling I was doing. Even members of government would call, all right, their spouses, etc. So as a junction radio program. So I learned that this in the Caribbean, one of the problems we have is they said that the whites were tidying, they were in bondage to avarice, and fornication was the besetting sin of the colonies. That's how they write history. The Form 6 book that they use, that actually were the first statements in the book that they put. Because, you know, we have a culture where people were sexually abused, and that passes down through generation, etc. When you get a wife or a husband, you sometimes need to have a discussion with them. Were you raped? Were you so and so? What stage at which you lose your virginity? Because if they tell us psychologically, if a woman loses her virginity at 14, she's very likely to become an addict. If she loses her virginity at 12 or under, she's likely to try and commit suicide. All these different things there's so much information out there now. So what happens is sometimes people are traumatized, and sometimes you have a traumatized spouse. Now, regardless of whether your spouse, male or female, is traumatized and they have developed certain bad things, it doesn't mean that they don't deserve love. So what I've learned is that if God puts somebody into my hands, male or husband or wife, God is trusting me with one of his children. And therefore, what I'm doing my best to try and understand the person as well as to understand their needs. Because secondly, again, to the other person, I'm going to be married a virgin and then end up in crazy stuff. And that's something because the husband never understood how to lay down his life in understanding that woman's needs, how to deal with her specific way in understanding and receiving love. So even that is an important thing in laying down your life. You know, one of the things I was very careful with my wife at this time was to try to figure out what makes her happy. What makes her happy, you know? And I'm getting parts of it. I don't think I have 100%. She's across the room watching me. You know?
Be careful.
The thing about being married is that we are different, and you know we learn that different, but then we also have to accept the responsibility and the pain of that difference. You know, all right. So again, but let me come back to say this: I don't believe adultery is the end of a marriage.
That's right.
Especially if the person is willing to change, to take counsel, and they're willing to do the acts of reconciliation, etc. You know, that's where I stand, for male or for female, etc. You know, but if the person wants that, but however, the person wants to continue in that direction, etc. I can't counsel anybody to stay.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's right. That's what stand is on that matter.
I can't. Well, I think that, remember, there was a prophet that God told to
Hosea.
marry to marry a harlot.
Yes.
And whenever I think of the issue of adultery, I always go back to that experience, to that book. That is a serious example that the Bible has as to commitment, as to dedication and sacrifice for love. Right? And I think God was basically telling Israel, look, I love you like this, and regardless of who you go after, going and worshiping other gods, and so I am there to seek you out and to pull you back and everything. And the truth is, I don't know if anybody, as a human being now, in the reality that we live, that might be willing to do that. But that is what is required of us as Christians to do. The issue of marriage is a serious one. That covenant between man and woman is a very, very serious one. And even before we get into it, one, we have to do that introspection with ourselves. And when we are courting or dating or going through that process of choosing a wife, we have to have that discussion. And certainly I agree with Pastor Garwe again. Certainly we must have the discussion to find out the background and to see whether or not, you know, we are compatible. Find out as much as you can. Too often persons get into relationships, and what they seek is just the physical, you know, the sex and everything else, you know, that nice honeymoonish googly eye kind of feeling that they get, you know, but we have to discuss the serious stuff during our courtship period.
So my question is, I want an answer, right? So let's say, okay, maybe not adultery. There's so many other traumatic events that happen in family life, whether it's the loss of a child, the death, having to take care of elderly parents, so now the family is moving in with you, etc. And so many other things can happen to cause a break in that commitment. Then, okay, I forgive, but how do I go back to loving that person? Because it's when adultery happens, or when you go through any traumatic event in marriage, you feel like, how did I ever look in your direction? Right? So when I'm at that point, and I understand you have to be willing to change, there's counsel, there's reconciling, like you said, Brother Pear, and I'm hearing you with commitment and dedication and sacrifice as seen in Hosea's example. So my question is, how do I love again? Because it sounds to me like you're saying, when I say marriage, the connotation is pick up my cross and follow Christ.
Well,
joyfully too.
but basically that is what it is. Basically that is what, as far as I am concerned, that is what it is. When you get into a marriage, you basically, is telling the other person, look, I am willing
Mhm.
to accept you as you are. We can change together. We know that there will be changes, but I'm willing to accept you as you are. I'm willing to walk through whatever difficulties, whatever mistakes, whatever faults, whatever shortcomings that each of us may have. I am willing to walk through that. One, to create a better life and I'm talking about from the male perspective, to create a better life for us all in this relationship. Now we have to understand that families that is the element of our society and our community. All right. And if we have a broader picture of what our society should be, okay, we have to now look at what we can produce, what we can contribute to our communities to make it a better place. And let me tell you, I always tell persons there is no ego within the confines of a marriage. There is no pride of individual, this kind of ego and pride that individuals may have. We have to take down that barrier. Just for example, and I want to use Genesis as an example. Adam and Eve was naked in front of God. They were always naked. They were always vulnerable because they had that relationship. All right. And when something else came in, then they realized they had to clothe up and all of that. We have to become naked in front of each other, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. We should be able to understand each other and see each other for who we actually are.
Bishop.
Okay. When you said ego there, so you're starting to read my notes. So because one of the problems we have in the Caribbean is the male ego, especially, And as a Christian, I have to die daily to my own desires and purposes. And that's what I'm saying, that can be the offense cannot lead my relationship. One of the things that Jesus spoke about was speaking to the sycamore tree. And the sycamore tree, he spoke about speaking to mountains in the context of releasing purpose. He spoke to sycamore tree. And when you read that in Luke chapter 17, sometimes we miss the story. The sycamore tree had two particular orientations to it, or three particular orientations in that story. One, the roots go 30 feet deep. But it's the fruit is only fermented when an insect comes and sting the fruit. All right, and then the tree dies in salt water. So what he was trying to say is that offense, when it comes into our heart, if you allow it, it could go with roots down to 30 feet deep. And the only way to kill that is to put that in the water of the word. You understand? The water of the word and every other thing that the sea represents in terms of connectivity and purpose and all these different things. And when you understand, I can't think about something done to anybody in scripture as bad as what was done to Joseph. When your own brothers sell you into slavery, and when you get a chance to jam them back, you ain't jam them, as you say in the Caribbean, because he understood that purpose. In fact, they were so scared that even after their father died many years, they sent a false messenger to say, before daddy died, he said, please forgive the brothers. So, again, sometimes because the orientation of our relationships is so sexual, and I understand that sex is the act of marriage and it separates the relation from all others, etc. But if the basis of your marriage is just sex, then I understand why sometimes that it becomes such a heavy weight. So sometimes men go say, well, I could forgive her if she thief money, if she spent money, I could forgive her if she go out and spend time with her relatives, the different things. But I think, the male ego gets in there. So some people, again, one of the reasons why some people are traumatized more than other people, again, is their love language. All right, if your love language is physical touch, then you hold that to be very dear. People who have physical touch as their love language doesn't even like you to touch them insincerely. So that's why the love and the touch of their spouse, etc. So that when their spouse is the pity of their wife's spouse, male or female, touching somebody else is intrusive, Nevertheless, it still comes back to the point of forgiving. And there was a question put down below there, and whether forgiveness starts off grudgingly or happily, the point is, if you start the process and understand how the process maintained now, let me just say this, when you're offended, it registers in your mind, it registers in your stomach. That's why when you see the person again, you will feel that adrenaline rush.
Mm.
If you make the decision to forgive the person, you're going to find if you keep reinforcing that decision, after a while, it will disappear from your stomach. That's where it registers, like in your spirit. Now, in your mind, you will always know this person will offend you. You understand? Now, what you can do, just like the human body, when a bone is broken and it's set properly, etc., where it's broken, it actually becomes stronger than the other parts of the bone. Your marriage can become stronger if you put the safety checks and the sense of accountability and responsibility in it. And that's what I'm saying. If the person is willing to change, or if the person is not willing to change, that you could do. So that's why I don't believe it's the end of a relationship in any particular way, you know. Now, there's some cultures we don't practice on outside the world. Where my wife come from, her father had 5 wives. You know, he was a king's son, right? And so they had multiple. And then there are 50 cultures in the world where they practice polyandry, where the woman marries multiple men. 50 cultures in the world today. The Caribbean ego has been developed in a particular way, I think, especially for the men, and that's why there's so many murders, etc., etc. But if you understand and you have a priority of purpose in your relationship, then offense is offense, you know, and you know. Go ahead.
Yeah. Gotcha. Totally got you. I like that though. The two metaphors that you use, not even metaphors, but just that unforgiveness registers in your brain and your stomach, and hence the fluttering or the adrenaline rush. And then at the site of the break where the bone is mended, it becomes stronger. And if your marriage can be like that, you come through adversity learning a number of things, you know. And even Joseph's story, one of the most told stories by the pair, right? But we sometimes forget, because what happens to me is obviously the most heinous atrocity ever, right? But if we remember Joseph, we get an example that says, perhaps even if we feel like what happens to us is the worst, there's still room to forgive and to love on the person that has done us wrong. So I want to come to our final question this evening, because I believe we spoke about loving again and forgiveness. Consummate love, in which there's a balanced measure of intimacy, passion, and commitment, will always have pain. Adam died with his wife, Christ died for his bride. What advice then would you give to us for lovers who are experiencing the pains of love? For those people who are on the call today or watching on YouTube and are saying, I hear y'all, this sounds so great, it sounds so intellectual, but I am in the midst of it. Right? And everything was great. We had that intimacy, we had the passion, we had the commitment, but I don't really want the pain, and I'm experiencing the pain now. How do we come through on the other side? How do we come through this adversity? Anybody? Anybody?
Okay, let me go. And then you can help my shortcomings. First to begin, many times we're in pain because we never establish boundaries, we never establish desire. Sometimes, you know, men, I jokingly say, you know, your husband, you know, he bathed twice today, etc. And when he watching you and winking, you know what you want. You understand? When it does, women simply don't say what they want. You understand? In the movies, these guys like they're reading the woman's mind. That is not life. There's a need for communication, because communication is the seedbed and the wind and the sunshine for a relationship. So sometimes it's a matter of not communicating. Secondly, if your marriage is in deep difficulty, the Bible tells us that if your brother offends you and you have to understand you're married to your brother or sister in Christ, talk to them alone. If not, then you go out and get not somebody who agrees with you to jam your husband or jam your wife, as we say, but to get somebody who can help deal with this thing from a sensible format, you know, and listen, because sometimes you might think you're in pain and don't realize your spouse in more pain, you know, and next, when it come, all right. Let me stop there for now. But okay.
Well, the truth is, I would have basically said the same thing that Pastor Gary said. The issue of communication. I have a friend of mine who's a counselor, and she said that she and her husband choose a day when they would talk about their relationships. All right, so it's not every day that they won't talk about it, but they choose a day when some of the difficult things that they may be experiencing, some of the issues that they may be having, they pick a particular day to talk about. And she said one day, she was so upset, so frustrated and everything that the day that they chose, she chose to talk about the issue outside of that day. On a different day, when they're supposed to be, they would have gone out and having a good time and all that, and she chose to pick that topic there. And it's like he was shocked. Why are you doing this now? Okay, why are you doing this now? This is the time for us just to, forget all the heavy stuff and to talk about things that are on a more lighter note and all of that. The thing about issues and the frustrations that our partners feel and we feel in our relationship has a lot to do with really and truly empathizing with each other, on trying to understand each other, and openly communicating with each other. Too often we do not talk about things that really and truly affect us. We go through life, and life has its own challenges. It has its own things that would pull us and tug us in all different directions. But we have to be able to get a quiet moment to really and truly zero in on the issues that affect us, and have that conversation. Now, the time picking that period is that it might be difficult. Okay, because a lot of times both men and women are so busy with all kind of other things that sometimes we feel that if the wife wants to talk about this now, you just don't have the time to deal with that. You have too much on your plate. So you must set aside a time where we can really and truly empty ourselves of some of the issues, and we could really and truly deal with it. But it happens. It is part of life. And we have to treat it, give it the time and give it the respect, and allow that moment for really and for an introspection on both of our parts in terms of the relationship. We have to be able to give it that. Yes, there's times of intimacy and all of that, and we make time for that, but we must make time for communication, and sometimes very deep communication about deep things that affect us as individuals and that affect us because of the relationship that we have. We have to spend some time to be able to deal and address some of the issues.
Let me say, a lot of times sometimes the pains in our relationship is based on a clash of history and cultures. And I don't, because, like from name, my wife is from one country, and sometimes you have just different cultures and expectations that you grow up with, family cultures, etc. So in one culture, the man eats, he leaves the wares on the table. The woman wants to know what the heck going on. Other places, there's no problem. My wife doesn't have a problem with that at all, and I'm so happy for that, So the different cultures, there's a culture clash. And then sometimes, again, too, it's extremely important for men to watch their tone. Now, not just women. I always explain to women, if you want your husband to hear you, speak softer and slower.
Thank you.
Softer, slower. You understand? If you drop your voice to a lower voice and you speak slower, a man will pay attention. Now, what a lot of women don't know is every man has an inbuilt mute button. And if he feels disrespected, that mute button goes on. And therefore, he will just tell you, all right. And he heard nothing that you said. I always say, walk up behind us, but I say, fire. You say, all right, honey. And he goes, sit down right there. Because once that phone is engaged, he's taught to mute. You understand? Now, that's, of course, if you start making that a practice in a relationship, right? If you're not accustomed to doing that, then once or twice, you might catch him. And men have to understand women, and I'm working on this from time to time. You have to watch tone again too, because you can hurt women with tones, etc. The Bible talks about, and again, I'm using Proverbs 15:1, and I'm using Ecclesiastes 9, I think it's around 17 there. So when you're talking, and there's another place in Proverbs, so when you're talking to a prince, by patience he's persuaded and the bone is broken. So that's the way you talk to your husband as a king. You understand? When you're talking to people in authorities, because one of the first thing a man feels is disrespect. Especially in our culture, he feels he's disrespected by the police, by his work, sometimes his pastor. He can't come home to his home, according to the book of Esther chapter 1, and get disrespect too, man. No, man. Oh, gosh. Mama guy, man. Like a king now. You know, so, I'll do anything you want up to half my kingdom if you make me feel.
Ladies, I hope you're listening to this, right? I laughing, but
no, that's serious, and that is real stuff. That is real
Yeah,
stuff.
no, I'm sorry, I'm laughing. That's just my nature, right?
That is real stuff.
And then the aspect of communicating deep things, and I don't know how it comes over in this program, but I was dealing with my church recently. But sometimes we have lost some very powerful men in the gospel because they had needs sometimes that they felt shame to share with their wives.
That's correct.
A man is picked up because he's peering, he's looking in people's windows to see women dressed in a particular way. Oh, talk to your wife, you understand? I'm using a rough example there, but talk to your wife. The wife would, son, you have needs. You understand? And those the needs of marriage and sexuality are very comprehensive needs.
Yes.
Extra. And sometimes, men sometimes men just afraid, sometimes women, talk to your spouse, let them know. I think my mentor used to say to John Wesley, said, if you want somebody to hear something, tell them 8 times. If it was a matter of death and life, tell them 48 times. But tell your wife in a non-threatening manner so she doesn't feel as though you're talking down to her as a child. Your wife is a partner in the grace of life. If crisis comes, I understand if my wife has to shout, it was a crisis is crisis, But generally, we have to learn to become respectful in our tones. And again, let me say this, wife, learn to weight your words. If your husband drops his socks on the ground and you spend half an hour talking about that, but then when he talks every Sunday speaking to Sister Shirley, and spend 5 minutes complaining about that, he's going to pick up the socks, but he's going to horn you with Sister Shirley. You upset your weight, your words. You understand? Learn to prioritize the things that have priority in it. Learn to minimize the things that minimize. I'm not condoning any bad action here, but I'm saying to understand men have a strange way of thinking, etc. Very practical in our way of thinking, etc. So communicate. Also, as a woman, you have to learn the time when your husband is and what makes him amenable to your words. Remember when Esther went to the king, and she found favor with the king after the prayer and fast, and she could have said, "Listen, there's a man outside there. He want to kill us." No, she said, "Come to a banquet that I'm having for you." And when in the middle of the banquet he was enjoying himself, she said, "Come to our next banquet." Because her gift was hospitality.
Yeah.
In the area of hospitality, she was able to deal with the whole Haman problem. Some of you women, your husband just walked in, he had a bad day, he tired like sin, you ain't treat him good for anything special over the last few days, he did the same food every evening that you're warming up, and then you want to tell him about do something heavy and hard. The man thinking about how I can replace you.
I am not smiling. I am not smiling.
That's between Mr. Garvey and I.
Yes.
That was for you to hear.
I am not. But no, what I love
It is the truth.
It is. What I love about this is that it goes beyond, the formalities of Sundays, where, you speak the word and everybody's prudish and we go home and we say, have a blessed week. But we're able to come and talk about the secrets, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about Valentine's Day was Wednesday. And for those of us, and I say us just generally, who, put on our bonnets and our long robes and went to sleep and didn't appreciate, what Valentine's means. So Bishop Garvey, we're listening and we're taking notes. And just being soft and slow if you want your husband to hear you. That innate inbuilt mute button. I'm gonna have a soft and slow conversation this evening about that innate mute button. And I like the last 2 points you all made, because I was going to ask about the issue of respect. Because I think sometimes for women it is painful, or more painful, to give respect to our husbands than it is to sacrifice for them. So I really like the points that you just made about prioritizing and minimizing and weighting our words, and learn what makes our husbands and wives amenable to what we want to hear, and using our gifts to make sure that the home is a sanctuary. And it is already 8:30. Our time has come to an end, but I see persons putting good stuff and good word in the chat. We want to acknowledge everyone who joined us on Zoom and on YouTube this evening. I want to especially acknowledge Pastors John and Jean Francis, Pastor Griffith, for joining us and always supporting Dr. Neff, who's here. So this evening we learned a bit about enduring love. We know that the greatest expression of love is death, but we also learned about how there's a balance between intimacy, passion, and commitment. And that commitment side will always have pain, or will always generate some form of pain, and how we deal with it, how we love again, how we forgive. And that it can be equally painful to give respect in a marriage as it is to lay down our lives. So we do hope that you learned something. Gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to give closing words, and then I'm going to hand over to Pastor Henry. So Brother Pay, I'm going to come to you. Closing words on enduring love.
Yes.
There's a question in the chat.
It is.
Hold on. There's a question in the chat, and I just want to ask the person if that is a genuine question or a joking question, because we don't take any question or comment lightly on this program. And so if you could just, that is a genuine question. I'm going to treat it as a genuine. Okay, yes. Were any of you cheated on? Were any of you cheated on? And I think perhaps the weight of that question is it, I guess you made it sound very easy to move on from infidelity. And I can genuinely say we know that the process is hard if you have been cheated on. So gentlemen, everyone, if you could just give us a few more minutes to address this. Were you cheated on? If not, can you explain that what we advise sounds more easy than it really is, or it sounds easier than it really is to deal with in reality? Perhaps Bishop Gary, I'm going to come to you simply.
That's a stripped down question there, man. Not in this relationship, but yes, I was cheated on, and I had to deal with that reality. And again, it was multiple times. And the thing about it is that it was painful, but it allowed me to spend time in the presence of God. It's partly what awoke me to the whole area of consciousness in the area of marriage and counseling, etc. And what was meant for evil, I think God dealt for good, etc. And as I said, it's not that when eventually it did end after many years, etc. It wasn't even, to me, it wasn't that. It was the person not willing to change, etc. Because again, as maybe if I was a more mature person, I might have been able to get to the foundation of that person's heart and life. So all those things have woken me up to understand now some of the things we need to look for, etc. So if I'm counseling, it has made me smarter. It made me wise in terms of how to help people, or to attempt to help them, because we also have to acknowledge the fact that some people don't want to be helped. They're stuck in their ways. They don't want to change. All right. But yes, I've been there, and I understand it's very painful. And it was, I know it is for the person to watch you and tell you not being repentant, that they enjoyed the situation, and it's nothing. I've been there, so
Yeah.
right.
I too have been there in another relationship, and the truth is that we actually have become very, very good friends, very, very good friends, and it has a lot to do too with the frank discussion, the open discussion, the fact that you really and truly appreciate the person, right? Even though you might have been in love with the person, and they again, we just agreed to go our separate ways, all right? That was a factor in causing us to separate, but we became very good friends. And that friendship still exists today, to the extent where, we talk all the time, I mean, my wife knows her, and we have a very good friendship, all right? But it took a great deal of maturity on my part. I could only talk for me. It took some introspection as to maybe what I might have done to contribute towards that, and how do I address it? All right. And the fact that it also made me appreciate the fact that in your relationships, you need to have very open, very honest, and very deep conversations about yourself, about your fears, you have to strip yourself naked in front of your partner, so that they would understand and see the real you. Okay. But we were able to get past that. All right. And today we do have a very good relationship in terms of just a friendship. Yeah.
So I have a follow-on. Guys, I know that we're supposed to end the program, but when God gives us these opportunities, I feel like we need to see it to a natural end. So just bear with us. Brother Pierre, this is the second time you spoke about stripping yourself naked to your partners, and oftentimes we wear masks, right? Trinidad Carnival just finished, Brazil Carnival just finished, everybody masquerading,
Yes.
Trying to be themselves, but wearing these masks. And I like that you talk about stripping yourself naked and being vulnerable, because a lot of times, even in relationships, we sometimes feel like there isn't a safe space. And both you and Bishop Gary referenced it earlier. So I just want to know if y'all can talk a bit more about how to create safe spaces within marriage for both men and women to be themselves, to remove the masks, to not masquerade, so that when we say, this is my fear, or this is an area where I'm vulnerable, they're not held for stones like women sometimes hold it. I'm speaking for myself. I can hold things for later on, or where they're easily dismissed. So I don't know if any one of you want.
Yes, I would. Let me go first. People have to understand that your relationship is yours. You have to take ownership for it. All right. So the man and the woman, this is our relationship. We function within this relationship by the things that we agree upon. Okay, not what the outside or society dictates for us, but we function within the things that we could survive with, that we could operate with, and that's how we function. Let me give you an example. I love to wash clothes and iron clothes and all that. You have some men that would say, well, that's not a man's job. Hello, but that is part of my contribution to my relationship. Okay, so I would take everybody's clothes and I would iron it. All right. I don't like washing wares. All right. So my wife and my children, that they would do that. But we have to find our niches in terms of the things that we could survive with. All right. Now, when it comes to how I feel, when I come home, I'm supposed to have a shoulder to cry on. Right? I'm supposed to be able to come and just empty myself to you and get the support that I need. But that is within the confines of my relationship. That's how my relationship functions. Now, I don't know about yours, all right? But that is how we survive. Now, I say that just to set the basis of what the whole issue of stripping yourself. I suppose so as a man, I go out there and everybody sees me as leader and as this, that, or the other, as, you know, having status in society. But my family sees me as leader, but they also see me as vulnerable. And I set that vulnerable tone because that's what family is supposed to be able to do in terms of supporting each other. All right? So I could come home, and because I had a hard day, and I want to just shed tears because of the issues that I'm faced with, I should be able to do that within that safe space and get the support of my family, not just my wife, but maybe my children, get that support. Okay? But we have to understand that our families are our little domains. You know, that is where we could really and truly be who we are, and not have to show the face of status and leader and everything that we have to do that outside there. We should be able to do that within the confines of our family.
Bishop.
I'm not sure there's anything to add. That's really not a good answer, you know. I do believe, you know, we have different faces that we show. We have the eagle, the ox, the man, and the whatever the next one is. Different faces, and we all be, you know, it's all necessary, etc. But vulnerability to me comes from the point of, you know, being willing to listen to your spouse and to question the relationship. You know, women find some things easier to do when they're treated good.
Mhm.
If you're not, I believe in sharing your needs, but also listening very heavy to the needs of your spouse. I believe, you know, it's the law of sowing and reaping. I believe the woman, just like how the Holy Spirit moved over the waters, I believe the same way a man must brood over his relationship. Women naturally do that. They're constantly counting their relationship and judging it. I believe a man has to learn that expertise, where he constantly looks and, you know, is she happy? How is she feeling? How is she, etc. And then your contribution to that, and then being able to question the environment. Now, sometimes the problem we have has to do with the introversion of some people, because introverts many times will pull things within and then leave it there. So therefore, again, you have to be wise in terms of how to coax that out of your spouse. Some people are extroverted and they will drop everything. They don't hold anything back. You don't have to worry about anything. So I think learning the needs, the nature, the culture, etc. of your spouse and the culture that you're developing in your home is important. Now, my kids are old. When I, well, sorry, when I mean old, I'm grandchildren, right? Right? And I expect great grandchildren in about 5 or so years, 5 to 10 years. Right? Because I started off pretty young. I got married at 20, crazy me. All right?
You have the wealth and knowledge now, nonetheless.
So I learned the hard way, all right? So I don't have that some type of scenario. So so understanding your spouse and the reality of their needs to me is a very important thing. You know, I think people are need oriented, and then there's also that's only one aspect of it. There's also a heavenly dimension where God is trying to birth some things into your marriage. As a pastoral home, we have pastoral responsibilities. Then after we also have, my wife has a huge family, you know, coming from a rural family, etc. in Swaziland. And so, you know, but we are constantly, we have things pulling on us, etc. So we have to be praying about these people, praying about my family. And she's very good at that as far as getting involved in family situations, etc. So, and it is in our we spend a lot of time together, In fact, unless she's going out to do something, we are busy. Out of 168 hours, we're probably together 166 hours. Right? So we have that kind of relationship. So we constantly, so I'm talking to her, she's talking to me, etc. And by the grace of God, I hope we get better at it. You know, as he says, as fear goes out and confidence in the person develops over time. Sometimes, and again, that don't happen overnight. You know, it takes years of working, speaking, listening, judging the person, judging the relationship, praying, developing a relationship with the Lord also too is an important thing. One thing I learned is that everybody is changing. Marriage is not the concrete banks of a river, it's the moving river. So that nothing is the same. Your wife leaves one way, and then she has some experiences. She's a different way. The same thing with the men. But again, if we keep surveying it and we keep committing ourselves to the biblical perspective and dying to self, coming alive to Christ, I believe the Christ in us helps provide a more or less a sturdy well, not more or less, it provides a sturdy foundation if we are biblically oriented, etc. So I hope that answer doesn't confuse people. I'm going to pay a good answer. That saves space.
Yes, he did. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for staying on just to allow us to respond to that question. Pastor Henry, over to you.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Neff. Dr. Sutherland. I told somebody today I'm getting old. Thank you so very Thank you so very much. That question about cheated upon, if it happens to you, I say it's very simple. It's very easy to get over. The one that I experienced, actually tomorrow would be 45 years since I'm in marriage. The first marriage was 22 years. This one is 23 years tomorrow.
Wow.
The first wife left me for a better guy, a guy that I couldn't argue with. And that was painful, extremely painful. And the whole idea of somebody cheating on you, leaving you, just understand that, have it in your heart to forgive. Don't be like the guy or be like the guy who is bitten by the snake, and instead of chasing after the snake, he cuts his arm where the snake bit him, so as to allow the poison not to get to his heart. And so sometimes you have, in forgiving, you may have to inflict yourself a little more pain. But once the poison is drained out, you're going to be all right. For the first wife who left me, it took me a while, a few years, almost a couple of years, but I'm certain where she wasn't bothering with me. She was in a better place, and I believe she is enjoying herself with her Lord tonight. But we are going to lose whoever God give us at some point in time, or somebody is going to lose. There are just a few people who go together. And so enjoy the time and come back next Saturday evening, God's willing. I see that there's some person in hair salon or nail salon that is enjoying the broadcast there. Lord bless you. And that's all the way in Arizona. Thank you very much. And join us next week. We are talking about, we are continuing the discussion on love. And the topic next week is
the evolution.
The evolution of love. The evolution of love. So join us next Saturday at 7:30 p.m. And we look forward to another great program. Have a blessed night, everybody.
Thank you. Blessed night to all.
Thank you very much, guys. Good. Great program, guys. Thank you. Let me just,
Thank you too.